my name is Darren Kuzma, and this is another webinar of Mind the Crack, your online life hacks, where we discuss life improvement tools based on the works of L. Ron Hubbard. Today we are continuing our webinar series on communication, and today's topic is getting your ideas across clearly, obviously. So before I start into that subject, I just want to check in to Zoom. I'm here live in a Zoom chat. If you are following on Zoom, you can give me a thumbs up or a wave right now. Let me know that you're ready to go and that you're paying attention. If you have any questions or any comments, put them into the chat, type them in there, and I will receive them directly so we can have some sort of interaction. If you're not on Zoom with me, but you're following on Instagram, on Facebook, or on YouTube, there is another host. Michelle is her name. She's following along with those platforms. And if you have a question or a comment or anything at all you'd like to originate, put it in there. Give some thumbs up if I say something that makes sense, or likes, whatever you want to. Share the video however you like. And Michelle can take any comment or question from that and put it to me here in Zoom. Okay, we are doing this as a webinar rather than just having it as online viewing content, though it will appear as that later, so that we can have you get engaged, because learning something has a lot to do with being active in using the information and thinking about how it can apply to your life. So when you get some new information, considering it not just on its own, on what understanding it, but also looking at how that can integrate into your life and how it could be useful to you and how it might actually broaden your reality and help you in some way. Okay, so there we go. I'm just going to glance over to Zoom and we're fine and ready to continue. Okay, so as I mentioned, the works of L. Ron Hubbard are the source that we are drawing these life improvement tools from. And in particular, this book I'm going to highlight a lot throughout the series on communication is called The Fundamentals of Thought. And it contains the basic principles of Scientology, and you will see how it is an applied philosophy. So it's not just a philosophy about how the way the world is or anything like that. It is an applied religious philosophy. So it's about the nature of existence and you as a spiritual being and how that relates to your life and other life. And therefore, as I said, it's practical. It's an applied religious philosophy. So it is practical in that way that you do things with it. The information is within it so that you can do things with your life using that philosophy. Okay, that's a little bit of a summary. And the subject of getting your ideas across. So what do I have to do with that? What is my experience in this concept? Well, as most humans, I've been communicating with people my entire life, and I have had a lot of my life spent in a professional capacity explaining complex ideas to people that have no experience in that professional area and helping them to understand it. So getting that idea across has certainly had its own challenges. And in addition to that, I have spent some of my time in theatre and writing and improvisation and off-the-cuff sort of explanations, as I'm doing quite a lot on these webinars here, to constantly improve how the concepts in my mind, the idea in my mind, that I get that across to an audience, and from any young age to senior age at all different levels of literacy. And that point of literacy will come up, as you're going to see in a bit. So, with all that experience, I did have a chunk of my life where I wasn't using any of the works of L. Ron Hubbard, and then since learning L. Ron Hubbard's technology and Scientology, I can definitely say that there's been a huge improvement in my ability to get my ideas across, no matter who the recipient is. So, let's look at some of those things. I'm going to highlight just a couple of points today. There's a lot more contained in this book, a lot more of the principles of Scientology that you could see how they apply to this. But let's start with something here. So, communication, as I have mentioned in the past couple of webinars, in Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard put forth a formula of communication. And when I say a formula of communication, what do I mean? Well, if you take something apart, and you could say a formula is almost like a recipe in some ways. So if you're baking a cake, or even something more simple, you're putting pancakes together, you've got eggs, you've got flour, you've got milk, you've got butter, you've got sugar, or you could even make it with less than that. So those ingredients are the formula to make pancakes. So in addition, heat and a stovetop pan, all those sort of things. So all of the things that are required to make pancakes, they would be the ingredients or the necessary components, and therefore we could call that a formula. So L. Ron Hubbard put forth a formula for communication. And without going into the whole thing, because there is a lot of detail, there are many component parts, precise and exact parts that have been detailed, but one of those aspects is having an idea in your mind or a concept, and then communication involves you in some way taking that idea and getting it across to another person or people in whatever way, and having that idea be duplicated in the mind of the receiver. Quite a difficult thing, much more difficult than you actually would expect. And you may have been familiar in your life of trying to achieve that and not actually achieving it. So let's look at some of the factors that relate to that. But first, I want to clear up something on the definition of idea and concept and how those two sort of words relate to each other. So we have from the Oxford Dictionary, and I'd like to go into some definitions, we have from the Oxford Dictionary the definition of idea: a thought or suggestion as to a possible course of action. So it's an idea, a thought, so from your mind, a thought or suggestion or something that's given to you as a possible course of action or a possible activity to do. Okay, kind of broad, doesn't really narrow things down, just a thought. Well, next definition, and how we could work this one out, it says a mental impression. Now, in order to understand that one, we'd have to clear the definition of mental and understand what that means, or of or relating to the mind, and impression. How do you get an impression in your mind? You're impressing into the brain in somehow? Anyway, that definition is kind of confusing, so I'm just going to push that aside because it requires a bit more defining to really get a concept, to really get a proper idea of what it actually means. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Next definition from the Oxford Dictionary: an opinion or belief. So that could be an idea. So what do you think of the current state of health in the country? What's your opinion? So that could be an idea per this definition. What do you believe happens to you when you die? Well, you have an idea of that. So these, what I'm trying to say is, or put across to you, is that these definitions here don't really give you a clear definition for an idea. It requires a lot of working it out and trying to see how it is. So L. Ron Hubbard put forward a definition of a concept that I'd like to read to you, and I think that this will be very, very helpful in at least establishing what that first point is. For you to have a concept or an idea in your mind, that first thing has to be clear and understood by yourself in order for you to get that idea across. So here it goes. Concept: a thought, completely without symbols, pictures, words, or sound. It is the direct idea of something rather than its sound or symbol. Okay, so what do we mean by that? So a thought. So if you close your eyes, you can have a thought. If you have your eyes open, you can have a thought. If you walk into a room that's very hot, you can have a thought. It's a thing that occurs with your mind. So a concept is a thought completely without symbols, pictures, words, or sound. Okay, so let's take an example. Let's look at the word walking. So when we say the word walking, you may get a picture in your mind of a human being walking along, making the legs move back and forth, moving across, changing the location in space from one position to the next by movement of the lower limbs and moving the body across. Okay, so that was a description using words, but in your mind, having the concept of walking is different from you having a picture of a person walking. And when you have a concept, it allows you to think flexibly. For example, if I said to you, the pen seems to be walking across the desk. Now, if the only idea that you had of walking was a person was a human being walking with one leg in front of the other, you might not be able to substitute that because it's fixed. It's fixed as a picture. You might not be able to substitute that to a pen. Whereas when you have the concept of walking, you can get the idea or see in the physical universe that this pen in some ways could actually move like this, because all the components that aren't given a specific symbol, they're not restricted to a certain type of character or anything like that, and there's not necessarily any sounds or things that go with it. When you have that pure thought or that understanding of the concept, the thought of walking, not being a picture of a man, you can then understand how a pen could, potentially walk across the desk. So, hopefully that makes things a little bit clearer. I'm trying to get my idea across to you about this definition of concept. So, if you got that, give me some thumbs up, give me some acknowledgements if you're on any of the other platforms. I really want you to get the idea of how a concept, being clear in your mind, is one of the first things that you must achieve if you want to get your idea across. Because if in your own mind you think of walking and it is only a person, a human being, walking with one leg in front of the other, then your audience, if they have a different idea or concept and you're not being clear about your own, then you're going to not be able to meet with understanding. They're going to have a different idea and you're going to have a different idea. So this concept of concept, or this definition of concept that I've just given you, I want to make sure that you understand that, because it is an understanding or having in your mind a thought that doesn't get slotted into or restricted by certain symbols or words or things like that. Okay, so moving on. We've got that idea of concept. So, it may have happened to you before that you've got a clear concept in your mind and you want to get something across to the other person. You can see it clearly and you can close your eyes and you can picture this certain thing, and maybe you're building something. Maybe you are thinking about putting a flower arrangement together, and in your mind it looks beautiful and it looks amazing, and you want to describe to someone how this flower arrangement looks. Well, if you don't have the words to describe how the flowers look, perhaps even the colors, you can have such a clear concept in your mind, but the vehicle, the thing that translates the idea from your mind to another person, if that step is lacking, then you're going to have problems. So this is where you having a vocabulary or an ability to compose the particles or the things that are going to send your message across, then you're going to fall down. So whether it be typing on an email, whether it be sign language, whether it be spoken words, whether it be actually music, when you don't have the tools to put your idea across, you don't have enough variance in them, because you only have two flags like on ships. There's only a restricted amount of descriptions you can make between ships if you're signaling with flags. This color, that color, these positions, and all that sort of thing. So language using symbols has to be known by you in sufficient degree. You have to know enough different words for you to be able to describe exactly what is in your mind and give it across to another. I'll give you an example. So if I say to you, think of a black cat. I just thought of a black cat and I want you to think of a black cat. Are we thinking of the same black cat? How do I know? How do I know that my idea of a cat got across to you in the same way? Well, when I was thinking of a cat, I was thinking of a bitumen road, freshly laid, nice and smooth, and then a black cat, posed in a position with both front legs straight down in front, and its tail sitting down on its hind, and its tail curled around in front of the straight front legs, and its eyes looking straight at me, blinking slowly, yellowish sort of green. Now when I use those extra words, maybe you get a better picture or a better concept in your mind of the picture that I had of that cat. Black, etc., where it was sitting, what its position was, etc., etc. Now if you've never seen a cat before, then I have a little bit of a different problem, because you, having never seen a black cat, or even a cat, may have difficulties of getting that in your mind. So this is where we look at the concept of positioning. You take something that someone does know, and then you compare it to the thing that you want to describe. So I could say to you, a green cat. Think of a green cat. Now, I didn't use any of the postural positions or other things like that because I'm kind of hoping that that will carry forward into this one. So if you just turn that picture of the black cat that you had, but make it green, you have a concept or an idea of a green cat. Now, does a green cat actually exist? I haven't seen one, but it allows you, by taking something that you do know and positioning it or comparing it to something that you do know. So that is a very effective technique if you want to get an idea across to someone that doesn't know anything about the subject that you're dealing with. Now, of course, we do need to use a language or words that are understood. And this is a very, very important part. In fact, in the beginning of every single book that you'll see in Scientology, there is a special note that talks about making sure that you understand the words. And when you understand the words, you will get the correct concept that was intended by the author or by the speaker or by whoever it is that's giving you the information. Because if you read across a sentence if you get a communication and there's a word in it that you don't understand or you have an incorrect definition for, then you won't be receiving the same idea, the same concept that was intended by the author. So just the same way, I say a black cat, and if in my mind, okay, there's a black cat sitting on the road, this position, posture, this color eyes, slightly narrowing the eyes and looking straight at me, I have that concept, but how do I know you have the same concept? I don't, unless I use enough information to describe it so that it becomes clear in your mind. Then if you've never seen a cat, I need to make sure that I compare something that you do know to something that you don't know that I'm trying to describe, and make comparisons to see how that could be constructed in their mind. So, to give you an example of this, I might say to you something like, the feline had a long tail. Now, if you know the definition of feline, you will have a good concept in your mind, at least of the tail of the feline. Perhaps not the rest of it, but if you don't know that the definition of a feline could mean a cat, you might think that, or you might end up picturing in your mind a long line of people waiting to pay their fee to get entry to the amusement park. You get my point? So if I'm using words that could potentially be misunderstood by yourself, then I need to make sure that I'm using words sufficient to describe it, or I'm comparing the unknown thing to something that you do know, that I know that you know, or perhaps is in the physical universe around you, so I can say, well, a cat is kind of like, not like that flower anyway, right? So this is another approach or another way that needs to be done. Okay, so feline as an example. Hopefully you understood that. If you need to clear up what a feline is, it means a cat, or is another word for a cat. Okay, so interestingly enough, if you go into maybe dictionary.com or the Oxford Dictionary online and you do any searches, you'll see that they have this graph of the usage of words over time. And words like thingy, what's it, doodad, doodah, thingamajig, jigger, all these words that are used to describe something that you have forgotten the name of, the use of those types of words has increased exponentially in the last 25 years, especially in the last 10. Now, why is that? Why are people struggling more, apparently, according to the Oxford, why are people struggling to find their words? Well, I personally think that it has to do a lot with literacy. The less literate someone is, the less vocabulary they have, the less they're able to describe something. And that is one major part when someone is trying to get their word or their expression across, is they don't have the vocabulary to express truly what is happening for them, or the idea that they have. Now, and I've heard this said before, is that one reason that art can be so attractive and so desired, or when great art occurs, the hallmark of it, or the thing that shows that it is great art is perhaps when it expresses or shows an emotion or thought or feeling that you have had, but in such beautiful and exacting words. So it uses the correct words just as you would like to have said it, but you couldn't find the words yourself. You know, someone talks about love as being like the sun, or warming you, just like on a cold day when the sun comes from behind the clouds and you can feel that warmth. Well, love is like that. Now, for someone that doesn't have a huge vocabulary, even though that was an extremely simple example, they can often struggle to put together words to describe their ideas. And so this is one thing that I have heard, and I do agree with, that great art is. It expresses either in the right way or with very simple words something that a feeling is that we have all shared, or something that you've had yourself personally. Okay, so knowing and having a vocabulary and increasing your literacy is also another part to that, because otherwise you won't be able to describe easily what it is that you have been thinking. Okay, so if you haven't been able to describe something or get your message across, these things, if you've come across them, they can make you feel frustrated, just the same way as if you can't do something and you're using the wrong method of opening. You know, there can be can openers, okay, of all sorts of different types, and I'm not sure if you've ever had the experience of going back to an old type of can opener after using the new type of can opener, and just trying to figure out sometimes how these different can openers work can be confusing. I've even seen someone give up because they didn't know how to use it. So not being able to find the right technique or have the right technique to communicate an idea can be very frustrating. So how do you handle that? Well, as we covered in the webinars on study, when you study, studying for application and studying for your own use is probably my best tip. So what do I mean? Well, you're trying to communicate something. What subject is it in? What area of life does it deal with? So when you have this narrowing down of the subject or the area of life or the thing that you're talking about, there are many words that are commonly used to describe that thing. Do you know them all? Have you studied a bit in that area? And when you have studied that, have you looked across each of the words that are within that subject to see if you understand them all? Because if you understand all the words that are across that subject, when you come to express your idea that is in that area, you will have the vocabulary to be able to describe at least what is existing. And then if your idea is not existing at all, you will be able to compare it, because you'll have comparative known to what is not known and what you're trying to get across. So finding the words of the subject that you're trying to communicate, making sure that you know all of those words so that you're not presenting something confusing is very, very important. Okay, beyond that, not finding your words and not being able to get your ideas across can be very frustrating. And you give someone some instruction, quite simply and verbally, to go and close a door. Well, which door are you talking about? So if you don't clearly describe things to people, then quite often they can get things wrong. And I'm sure every single person watching has an example of they've given someone a clear instruction. In their mind, it meant totally only one thing. And the person has gone off and they've done something completely different, because in their mind, door meant the garage door, not the front door, or whatever you might sort of take as an example there. Okay, so I think you can see what I'm saying there. Okay, so from any of those examples that I gave, I would like to hear from you on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or wherever you are there. If you have any excellent examples of how you wanted to, in your mind, there was no doubt, you were completely clear in what you needed to say or what you needed to express, but when you gave it to the person, they completely understood something else, got it completely wrong, and maybe it caused a lot of trouble for you. So if you've got any examples for that, I'd love to hear from you, because some of them can be quite comical. We are going to do a webinar, just while you're thinking of that, and if you're typing any of those in, I'd like to hear. We're going to do a webinar next Saturday, and that webinar is going to be about the point of duplication. which has to do with the opposite side of this talking to people with ease. So what do I mean? Okay, so here's person A and here's person B. So person A says something. So there's an idea that person A had, words get used, and those words get heard by person B. Now, what person B duplicates person A said has another factor to it. Because it can also be you're speaking very clearly to a subject that someone is definitely experienced in. But this person over here, hearing the information, doesn't duplicate it for a number of reasons. Maybe they don't hear it, maybe they're thinking of something else, maybe they don't intend to follow the instruction, or they don't intend to receive the message anyway. So there are other components related to getting your message across. And some of that has to do with you making sure that the other person does have their intention to receive what it is that you're saying. And you definitely have the intention to get across. But with all these different components, which we're going to get to, I just want to start today with giving you those points that you can be responsible for yourself. You have an idea. First, is it clear in your mind? Second, you have an idea. Do you have the right words to describe your idea? Do you have the objects that compare to it, or how it is different to certain things that your audience might actually know of? And the next point after that was, have you got an understanding of the words and a large enough vocabulary to make sure that you can answer any question or handle any uncertainty about it or describe it in full? Okay, so those things will make sure that what you're saying is coming out the right way. You also have to check on those other things as I mentioned. Okay, so I'm just checking in with Michelle here now. Michelle, if there's any questions or comments or anything that's come up on the other platforms, I'd love to hear. Otherwise, for now, what I want to do is direct you to this book. This book here covers the basic principles of Scientology. It's called Scientology, The Fundamentals of Thought. And within it, you'll find concepts like these that I went over, how communication has many component parts. And by studying this book, it will give you a very easy orientation to Scientology and seeing how it really is an applied religious philosophy. So it is something that you actually use in life, and how it helps you improve your life and exist better in your own self as a spiritual being. Okay, good. So nothing else to continue on with just now. If you don't want to buy the book, but you are interested in finding out more, there will be a link that will appear in the chat box or in the comment section of the platform that you're following on with. And what you can do is you can register yourself for a free consultation with one of our staff to discuss your personal issues, let us know, or let that person know what it is that you're running into, and to find out what in Scientology you could use to improve that particular thing, get us started improving yourself and improving your life. And there's no obligation, but if you want to have a personal chat with someone, that link will appear in the chat box or in your comment sections. Okay, so I just got the all clear from Michelle. No questions, no comments. Please, at any stage, look at our previous webinar content, leave comments, leave questions, or anything like that. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear if there's anything in particular you'd like to hear about any of the subjects that we're doing or have done, and that way we can engage and help you a bit more with these life improvement tools. Okay, Shanae for today. I'll see you tomorrow.